Hello everyone, and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 60, May the 2nd, 2017, Tuesday. Okay, as I am making this video right now, the FBI Director James Comey is in a closed-door session with the ranking members of the House Intelligence Committee. That will be the head Democrat and head Republican. There may be some other members of that committee in that closed-door session as well. Now, what is going to come out of that? Well, my guess is very little. What you will have is, as soon as the closed-door session is over, the ranking Republican and Democrat will come out and step up to a microphone. There will be journalists with their cameras and their microphones stuck in their face, and the ranking Republican and Democrat will make a brief statement, and then they'll take some questions, which they will not answer. They will dance and dodge around most of it, and when they get a real tough question, you'll just simply say it's a matter of national security, classified, and they can't answer the question. They always hide behind the national security wall. That's how they avoid answering the tough questions. So I don't believe that anything will come really out of very little information. There may be something leaked, but ultimately we're not really going to find out very much about what James Comey has to say, because James Comey knows that to answer these questions, especially in front of an open hearing, would reveal some very embarrassing things about himself and the FBI and their conduct in the particular part of this story, which is the surveillance of Donald Trump, because we know where he got most of his information to get the FISA warrant, and we know now that that information was unverified and was really a pile of garbage. So that's very embarrassing for him and the FBI, and he doesn't want the embarrassment, nor does the Congress, Republican or Democrat, want to embarrass the FBI and cause people to lose confidence in the FBI, because God knows we all have a tremendous amount of confidence in the FBI and James Comey. Next item up. Well, it appears that there is at least one person on the Senate Intelligence Committee that's going to push a little bit, and that would be Senator Chuck Grassley. Grassley's okay, but he also probably is part of the dog and pony show, and when it comes right down to it, he will not want to do any damage to the national security state either, and therefore I doubt that we'll get very much out of him, but at least he's making some effort, because it appears that they have now named Fusion GPS as the subject of a complaint to the Justice Department, which alleges that the company violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act by working on behalf of Russian principals, clients, to undermine U.S. sanctions against Russians. Basically, GPS was working for a Russian client at the same time that they were working with Steele putting together the dossier. And I don't believe they registered as a foreign agent. So this would be like you hiring an attorney to represent you in a case and finding out that your attorney is also representing the person that you're filing suit against. So that's kind of how that works. So they are putting the pressure on Fusion GPS. Remember, Fusion GPS is the company set up by Glenn Simpson, a veteran Wall Street Journal reporter, and two other colleagues to conduct political opposition research for political campaigns, which in itself is not illegal. The methods and how they go about doing it could be, but the actual collection of opposition research on political opponents is done in every campaign. So Fusion GPS continues to be a point of interest in these hearings. Also, Chuck Grassley, not very happy with the FBI. They have not been very forthcoming with documents that have been requested, and after the last set of hearings, they still had a lot of questions because James Comey refused to answer about 100 questions. So they sent him a letter asking him to clarify on some of the answers that he did give. And he has not responded back in a way that has satisfied Chuck Grassley. And so Grassley has given Comey and the FBI until May 12th to come clean and clear up the inconsistencies in his closed-door session with that committee. If he does not, then Grassley is saying that he will put a hold on DOJ nominees. So that's basically what's happening today in TowerGate, but there's a couple things I want to touch on here, and that is these hearings. Generally, these hearings, when you have hearings in Congress, they are designed to be fact-finding missions. Because keep in mind, the Congress, the House or Senate committees, do not have any prosecutorial authority. They cannot charge anyone. They cannot prosecute anyone. They cannot hold anyone accountable. What they typically purpose they serve is, well, typically it's political dog and pony show, but essentially what they say that they're trying to do, or what they're supposed to do, is to go on a fact-finding mission. And if at the end of their fact-finding mission they come up with reasonable suspicion that something that was learned in the fact-finding mission could constitute criminal activity, they will then recommend to the Department of Justice that they review the situation and determine if they need to, if there was criminal activity, if they need to appoint a prosecutor and convene a grand jury and begin criminal proceedings. So this is the role that the Congress hearings in Congress generally play. But in this particular situation, it seems to me that we are beyond that point. I don't see the need for any congressional hearings because we have already learned enough just from what has come out through open sources, through private sources to journalists. What has already come out and what is already known is plenty enough to go ahead and turn this over to a special prosecutor. So I don't know why we're going through with these hearings. Because let's go back and summarize exactly what we're looking at here. About 2 months ago, Trump tweets out that he had just learned that he had been wiretapped by the Obama administration. Wiretapped in quotes, meaning surveilled. For about 3 weeks, we got nothing from the media but all Trump's crazy, he's nuts, he's just tweeting crazy stuff again. But we learned after about 3 weeks that he wasn't crazy, that he was in fact under surveillance. So then they fell back to their typical fallback position to try to cover themselves, and they gave us a lie. The lie they gave us was that, well, what happened was that British intelligence, GCHQ, the British version of NSA, was conducting routine intelligence, and they stumbled on to some conversations between Trump or people around Trump and conversations with Russians. And some of these conversations revealed something that might have been of a criminal nature or something of a nature that needed to be looked at by the FBI or the Department of Justice. And so they forwarded this information to the FBI so that they could take a look at what was going on. But we now know that that was all a lie. As I have laid out for you exactly in a previous 2 videos, the entire chain of the dossier. What we now know is that what they told us was a lie, because what actually happened was that beginning in the primary campaign, the Republican primary, a big GOP donor alleged to have been tied to the Bush campaign went to Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm in Washington, D.C., and said, hey, we would like to retain your services to dig up some opposition research on Donald Trump, which they were paid $12,000 to $15,000 a month plus expenses to do. And Glenn Simpson, who runs the show there, turned to one of his old colleagues, Christopher Steele, who at that point had left the GCHQ and started his own company that did a similar type of thing in the UK, opposition research. Okay, so once Donald Trump won the nomination, the GOP nomination, there was no longer any need for this opposition research by the big Republican donor, likely representing Jeb Bush. So that was the end of the money flow into Fusion GPS. So at that point, Glenn Simpson said, well, gee, that cash flow was awfully nice. Unfortunately, the Republicans don't need it anymore because Trump has won the nomination. But hey, I bet some Democrats would like to maybe take advantage of this. So he went to some big donors whose names we do not yet know. That's a question that should be asked, but at this point, we do not know the names of those big Democratic donors. He went to them and said, hey, I have been doing opposition research on Trump for a big Republican donor, but since he won the nomination, they don't need my services anymore. So would you like to take advantage of the information I have put together? in which case the Democratic donors said, yes, we would like to retain your services and have you continue digging into Trump. And so that's how it all began. It began as a political operation. But at this point, it was a political operation being carried out by opponents in a political campaign, which is not illegal. Now, the methods used by GPS or Christopher Steele may have been illegal, but the gaining of opposition research on your opponents is done in every election and always has been. So at this point, we really have no particular crime. But what happens at this point is that Christopher Steele begins to submit this information to various sources. Obviously, he is working for his client, Fusion GPS, and they're paying him, so he is feeding them regular summaries of the information he is gaining. At the same time, he is also contacting FBI agents in Rome, Italy, and feeding them information, which is finding its way back into James Comey's inbox. At some point, when he gets really desperate, we learned that he passes this information on through a third party to John McCain while he was attending a function in Nova Scotia, Canada. And John McCain then gives the full dossier directly to James Comey. At the same time, we have John Brennan, head of the CIA, a serious anti-Trumper and a pro-Hillary supporter, and someone who was hoping to retain a position in the Clinton administration, begin conducting his own research and also using the GCHQ to conduct surveillance for him, because it's illegal for the CIA or any American intelligence agency or FBI to surveil an American citizen without obtaining a FISA warrant and having reason to do so. So he did what a lot of foreign intelligence agencies do. They exchange information. They go to because it's not illegal for the British spy agency to spy on an American citizen. You see? So Brennan went to the GCHQ and said, hey, we can't legally spy on Trump, so we want you to do it. And you give us what you learn from that, and we'll spy on some British citizens for you that you want spied on, and we'll exchange that information. So this is a common tactic that has been used by intelligence agencies for a long time. But the question of the day is, was this, three questions really. Number one, was there surveillance conducted on Trump and people around him in his campaign with the intent to do him political harm, to destroy his candidacy and later his presidency? The answer to that question we now know is yes. Was this a political operation? The answer to that question is yes. So the only question we don't know is who was behind the political operation. If it was just Republican or Democratic opponents of Donald Trump, then that alone in itself is not a crime. It's done in all elections. The methods used may have been a crime, but the act of the opposition research in itself is not. So the question of the day is that we know that this all became public. The dossier was made public by the release of the dossier by BuzzFeed. So the question of the day, and if there's only one question that the Senate and House Intelligence Committees answer, if only one question that they need to answer at this point to determine the question that we really need to know, was this a political operation being run out of the Obama administration? Because that is bigger than Watergate. If you are the current administration and you're using the intelligence agencies, using the law enforcement agencies, Department of Justice, or what have you, to conduct a surveillance or destruction campaign of a political opponent, which Donald Trump could certainly be seen as a political opponent, and we can assume that this information they were gaining was being passed on to the Hillary Clinton campaign, then in fact what you have is a crime much larger than Watergate. So the question, and really the only question that is left yet to be answered, is who gave BuzzFeed the dossier? Again, if the dossier was passed to them by Christopher Steele or by David Corn or by somebody in the Republican field or Democratic field, that again it's dirty politics, but it's not in itself illegal. The methods may have been, but the actual act of the of passing this to BuzzFeed was not. Now, BuzzFeed has got a problem, and they're being sued because the dossier turned out to be false. And there were people's names mentioned in the dossier who became public, and as a result, they were slandered. And there's a civil lawsuit going on. But the question of the day, the single question that needs to be answered, that is the thread that you pull on, that unravels the entire sweater. Who gave that dossier to BuzzFeed? Because if that dossier was passed to BuzzFeed by anyone in the FBI, the Department of Justice, the Obama administration, the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, or any other three-letter alphabet agency within the government, anyone within the government that passed that information on to BuzzFeed, the dossier, we now have not only a political sabotage campaign by a sitting administration, we have a extremely high crime, multiple felonies involved, multiple people involved. And at this point, this is why I believe that we're way past these hearings. We don't need congressional hearings. We already have enough information. You only need enough information in the congressional hearings to determine that a crime may have been committed, that there's evidence to suggest that a crime has been committed. And we now have overwhelming evidence that possibly a crime was committed. This should go immediately. We don't need congressional hearings. This should go immediately to the Department of Justice. They should immediately review everything that we know, which is what I just told you, and they should say, yes, there is certainly reasonable suspicion that a crime took place, that the Obama administration or agencies of his government, which he was in control of, leaked this dossier, which was classified, to BuzzFeed, which was also a lot of false and unverified information. Now, the FBI has a problem because the information they used to get the FISA warrant was based on unverified information. This is why Comey doesn't want to answer questions, because it's embarrassing and possibly even illegal. So, the question of the day is who leaked the dossier to BuzzFeed. If it was someone within the Obama administration, Department of Justice, FBI, or any intelligence agency, you immediately convene a grand jury, bring in the special prosecutor. He brings in his other prosecutors. They begin calling people to testify. Charges are filed, and people go to jail. Simple as that. So, as this dog and pony show is going on, they are going to try to obfuscate, cloud the mirror. They want to make sure that when these hearings are drug out as long as possible, and that you get tons and tons of bits and bits of information, they'll never connect the dots for you. They'll just confuse you and hope other things hit the front page of all the newspapers and TV networks to keep you distracted. So at the end of the day, you end up with the same thing you ended up with in Benghazi, and the IRS scandal, and Fast and Furious, and 9/11, and Waco, and every other damn investigation they do. It's designed as a cover-up operation. And we know that because they're continuing to do this dog and pony show when we already have enough evidence to move beyond that. We have the evidence. All we need now is a prosecutor, a grand jury, and to start calling the witnesses and to find out who leaked that document to BuzzFeed, because that is the thread. But when you pull on that, we'll unwind it all. So this is where we are. Now, I know a lot of you from the comments section, I read all the comments, and I know a lot of you are very frustrated. And I know you're probably tired of me of going back and relating the story to Watergate. But remember, Watergate took 2.5 years to unravel for very good reason. Because just like in this case and every other case, the Congress attempted to make it all go away. But because they had a whistleblower who was Mark Felt, who was known by the name Deep Throat, who was the deputy director of the FBI, who knew the entire story, knew the entire series of crimes that had been committed, he continued to keep Bob Woodward on the path. And he told him the thread that he pulled on, that he told Woodward to pull on, that would unravel that sweater, was when he told Woodward to follow the money, which they did. It took them about 2 years to figure it out, but when they finally determined that the money that was paid to the Watergate burglars was paid directly out of the campaign to re-elect, and only 5 men controlled that fund. Once he found that out, that put them inside the White House, and that's when the whole thing unraveled. Now, there's maybe a deep throat character or several deep throat characters involved here, people within the intelligence community or the Justice Department or the FBI who know the whole story, who might start leaking. Maybe they're just sitting back waiting and watching to see what comes out. There's also some honest reporters working the story, pulling on threads, just as I am doing. Although I'm more of a connect the dots person. I'm not in Washington, D.C. I'm not being paid to go out and investigate this. I'm not an investigative reporter. I'm someone who sits and looks at all the information and I connect dots. And then I use common sense to try to keep them from being able to confuse you. What I'm trying to do is keep everybody who's tuning into my videos focused on the target. Because as I say, if you cannot see the target, you damn sure can't hit it. I'm going to make sure that we all stay focused on the target. So, a lot of people are frustrated, but as we know, there's also a civil suit. And the civil suit is by this man named Gubarev, who was outed by the Wall Street Journal or by BuzzFeed that he was the man who allegedly organized the hacking into the DNC. He, of course, disputes that fact. He's got an attorney. He's filed a civil suit against Christopher Steele and BuzzFeed. That case is currently being played out in Florida. I don't know when the first hearings are scheduled to start, but we do know that the legal process has already begun. Now, Donald Trump, you got to remember, in most cases, and why this is different than most of these other things, Benghazi and all these other things, in Benghazi and the IRS, both parties have reason to be part of a cover-up because they don't want the truth coming out because there's nothing in it for them. But in this particular case, the subject and the target, the person who was injured as a result or was attempted to be injured and politically destroyed, the target was Donald Trump, President Trump. And therefore, President Trump is not going to be part of the overall cover-up operation. He's trying to get to the truth. He can't be bought off. Mr. Gubarev will probably take an out-of-court settlement because his issue is money. He believes that his company has lost money because his name came out in the BuzzFeed story. He wants his name cleared and he wants to sue for damages. He can probably be paid off, which is what happens a lot of times in a civil suit. But in the case of Donald Trump, he doesn't need the money. He's rich. He was the target of an operation to destroy his candidacy and later his presidency, and then a cover-up resulted after which is probably still going on, in the destruction of devices, documents, and various types of stonewalling. So, Donald Trump, my guess, and according to him and his attorney, are sitting back letting this thing play out. They probably don't believe the Congress is going to get to anything, but they're going to let that play out. They're probably watching the Gubarev hearing because some of the same questions that Mr. Gubarev's attorneys are asking are exactly the same questions that Donald Trump and his attorney want to be asking. My guess is that if those questions don't come out, or if that civil suit is settled out of court, then what Trump will do is that he will file a civil suit, and his attorney has already stated that they're looking into that. I think they're sitting back watching and waiting, and if the questions that they need to have answered and to be revealed do not come out, they will file a civil suit, and by filing a civil suit, it takes it out of the swamp. It puts it into a civil proceeding where no member of Congress, no intelligence agencies, no Justice Department, no FBI has anything to say or do or has any role to play in the court hearings. It's all done in the civil court system with a judge, a jury, and a prosecutor, or in this case, two attorneys, one representing the plaintiff and one representing the person being charged or sued or accused. And so at this point, by taking it out of the swamp, you get the actual answers to the questions because you can call those witnesses. You can call BuzzFeed, sit them down there on the witness stand, put them under oath, and say, who leaked you that 35-page dossier? Who gave it to you? And if the answer to that question is anyone inside the Obama administration, the Department of Justice, the FBI, or anyone else, boom! It's over. Bigger than Watergate. Lots of people will go to jail. Period. So, be patient. I know it's hard, it's frustrating, be patient. Donald Trump was the target. He will not be part of the cover-up. He wants the truth, he's being patient, he's playing his cards exactly right, and remember, 2.5 years for Watergate to play out. I don't think it'll take that long in this particular situation, but it's going to take some time. But it will, I believe, eventually reach equilibrium, and I believe we will get to the bottom of it. That's my thoughts. So that's TowerGate, day 60, May the 2nd, 2017. You guys have a good day. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing the video. Thank you for keeping your interest in the situation. It's extremely important, and I'll continue to do my very best to not let the criminals in the swamp confuse you, misdirect you, misguide you, and keep you from actually understanding what's actually going on. I'm going to try to keep us all focused on the target. Thank you. You all have a good day. See ya.